He heard his name on the radio, and he just called the FBI and said, just come get me.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the most infamous members of the FBI's most wanted list who faced justice through legal or mortal means.
He was a criminal at age 13.
Leslie Isben Rogge. The internet has given us some wonderful things like funny cat videos, sourdough bread recipes, or if you're Leslie Isben Rogge, a one-way ticket back to jail. The prolific American bank robber is believed to have carefully executed roughly 30 bank robberies over a multi-decade crime spree.
Since he escaped from federal custody in 1985, Rogge has been charged with bank robberies in Arkansas and North Carolina.
He was finally arrested for one carried out in Key Largo, Florida in 1984, but managed to escape after bribing one of the guards.
But nothing that he said or did, he was very cool, calm, collective. I mean, he wasn't afraid,
He made it onto the FBI's most wanted list in 1990 and turned himself in 6 years later during a nationwide manhunt in Guatemala. The manhunt had been triggered by a first-of-its-kind event. Someone had recognized Rogge's photo on the FBI website. He is currently incarcerated and serving a 65-year prison sentence.
His case marks the first time a criminal has been caught using the World Wide Web.
Eric Rudolph. They say one man's trash is another man's treasure. Well, unless you're Eric Rudolph, then it's pretty much just trash better left untouched.
Jeffrey Postel wasn't practicing any extraordinary police work. He thought he'd simply caught someone trying to break in to this grocery store.
Rudolph served in the military before being discharged for marijuana use. He planted a bomb in Centennial Olympic Park, Atlanta during the 1996 Summer Olympics, killing one person and injuring many others. The bombing led to the moniker Olympic Park Bomber and landed him on the FBI's most wanted list in 1998.
A fugitive with $1 million reward for his capture.
This wouldn't be his last crime, though. He was responsible for multiple additional bombings, targeting abortion clinics and a gay bar, until he was captured in 2003 while rummaging through a dumpster. He pleaded guilty and received 4 consecutive life sentences that he is still serving in a supermax prison.
He didn't change a thing.
No, except that his actions destroyed a lot of lives.
Warren Jeffs. This infamous religious cult leader was born in 1955 in Sacramento, California. His father, Rulon, was president of the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, a Mormon sect known for practicing polygamy. Jeffs inherited that leadership when his father passed away in 2002, along with most of his father's widows.
He really kind of set himself up as God.
He arranged marriages between his male followers and minors, landing him on the FBI's most wanted list in 2006. He didn't last long on the run, though, and was caught only a few months later during a routine traffic stop. While initial efforts to convict him in Utah and Arizona were overturned, it was Texas that handed him his final verdict, a 2011 life sentence for sexual assault.
Jeffs walked out of the courthouse silent after being sentenced to life in prison.
Juan Garcia Abrego.
Until this week, very few people had ever heard of Juan Garcia Abrego, but now he's on the FBI's top 10 list.
Before becoming the first drug trafficker on the FBI's most wanted list in 1995, Juan Garcia Abrego dealt in stealing cars and trafficking drugs. He then succeeded his uncle Juan Nepomuceno Guerra as head of the famed Gulf Cartel in Mexico. Garcia Abrego revolutionized the way the cartel did business, expanding their smuggling operations and forming an alliance with the Cali cartel in Colombia.
Look closely. This man is the ruthless leader of one of the most powerful criminal organizations in North America, the Gulf Cartel.
He spearheaded money laundering operations that likely hit 8 figures and oversaw massive protection rackets for other cartels. Estimates from American business and government sources in the mid-90s put his net worth somewhere in the $10 to $15 billion range. He was arrested for drug trafficking in 1996 and extradited to the United States, where he is serving a life sentence.
It's encouraging that 2 governments are seriously working together to stop the flow of drugs from Mexico to the U.S.
Thomas James Holden. Thomas James Holden started out doing payroll delivery robberies as a member of the Holden Keating gang. The notorious gang would end up committing dozens of robberies over the next few years, including a $135,000 U.S. mail truck heist. Holden was first arrested in 1928, but channeling his inner Michael Scofield, broke out just 2 years later. He was eventually rearrested and remained in prison until his parole in 1947. Holden became the inaugural member of the FBI's Most Wanted list in 1950 for the murder of his wife and brothers-in-law. Described as, quote, a menace to every man, woman, and child in America, he was captured for the final time in 1951 thanks to a very vigilant newspaper reader. He died in prison while serving a life sentence. James Charles Kopp. After the 1998 killing of physician Barnett Slepian, perpetrator James Charles Kopp led authorities on a manhunt that crossed international borders.
We are outraged that somebody would have the audacity and the just terrible gall to come in and do that to another human being.
Kopp's radical anti-abortion viewpoints motivated the murder and earned him the label of terrorist by some institutions. He sought refuge in Mexico, Ireland, and eventually France, evading capture for years and becoming the 455th fugitive to be placed on the most wanted list. After his apprehension by French authorities in 2001, Kopp was extradited to the U.S. to face trial and eventual conviction. Though Kopp avoided the death penalty, Judge Michael D'Amico declared the act, quote, premeditated and immoral. He was given a 25 years to life sentence, which he still serves in the Mendota Federal Correctional Institution. James Whitey Bulger. Most 14-year-olds are hanging out with their friends, playing sports, or complaining about their parents. 14-year-old James Whitey Bulger, meanwhile, was arrested and in juvie.
Then Bulger's life of crime truly began.
The Boston native had already developed a reputation as a fierce, loyal, and vicious criminal, one that would only continue to grow as he took over the infamous Winter Hill Gang in South Boston.
50-year-old Bulger quickly seizes control of the remaining Winter Hill Gang.
Bulger became an FBI informant in 1975, ratting out his criminal rivals. In exchange, his FBI handler made sure his own crimes were ignored. Bulger went on the run in 1994 to avoid a RICO case against him and was added to the FBI Most Wanted list in 1999. He managed to evade capture until 2011 and was killed in prison in 2018.
The notorious Boston crime boss James Whitey Bulger is dead.
Theodore Ted Bundy. This infamous serial killer confessed to taking the lives of over 30 women, many of them college students.
Bundy was seemingly unstoppable.
His crimes, known for their cruelty and viciousness, included the 1974 Pacific Northwest killing spree and the 1978 Chi Omega sorority house break-in in Florida.
In the early hours of January 14th, 1978, just 1 week after arriving in Tallahassee, Ted Bundy struck again.
Bundy has been described as, quote, sadistic, quote, cold-hearted, and, quote, the definition of heartless evil, and was known to revisit many of his crime scenes. His ability to evade law enforcement struck fear into the hearts and minds of people across the country. Bundy was placed on the FBI's Most Wanted list in 1978 and arrested shortly thereafter. He received 3 death penalty sentences and was executed via the electric chair in January 1989.
Only when facing almost certain execution, after 11 years on death row, did Bundy finally start to confess.
James Earl Ray.
Dr. Martin Luther King, the apostle of nonviolence in the civil rights movement, has been shot to death in Memphis, Tennessee.
In April 1968, outside a motel in Memphis, Tennessee, James Earl Ray assassinated activist and minister Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He fled the scene, earning himself a spot on the FBI's Most Wanted list. Ray was eventually apprehended while trying to board a flight in the UK and sentenced to 99 years in prison. He escaped in 1977, landing him right back on the FBI's Most Wanted list for a second time. He was recaptured 3 days later and another year tacked onto his sentence. While in prison, he maintained his innocence and claimed to have been a victim of a grand conspiracy. He pleaded for a new trial that was never granted and died of illness in 1998.
He spent the rest of his life behind bars, yet always maintained his innocence.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Osama Bin Laden. Many years before he was the worldwide face of terror, Osama Bin Laden was born to a wealthy Saudi Arabian family in 1957.
He was the 17th of more than 50 children of a self-made billionaire.
For years, he used his wealth to support resistance fighters in the Afghan-Soviet War before founding al-Qaeda in 1988. The group was responsible for numerous terror attacks, including the 1998 U.S. Embassy bombings that landed bin Laden on the FBI's Most Wanted list. Just a few years later, he shocked the world with the horrific events of 9/11, claiming nearly 3,000 lives in the world's deadliest terrorist attack.
Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror.
He then went into hiding, leading to a decade-long global manhunt that finally ended in 2011 when he was killed by members of SEAL Team 6.
The United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama Bin Laden.
Which of these criminals do you think is the worst of the worst? Let us know in the comments below.
There is already a full-time task force dedicated to prosecuting the drug kingpin.